As great as Muhammad Ali was in the ring, he was also one of the great talkers of our time. And he met his match in ABC's Howard Cosell when so many others refused to call Ali by his Muslim name.
Howard Cosell's career was the definition of unpredictable brilliance. He wasn't a former athlete, he wasn't polished or universally loved, but he became the voice millions associated with American sports. Fierce, opinionated, and unafraid to challenge the status quo, he shaped the way sports were covered on television. Fans either adored him or couldn't stand him, but nobody ignored him. From championing Muhammad Ali to turning Monday Night Football into a national phenomenon, Cosell seemed untouchable. Yet one night in 1983, a single offhand remark triggered the scandal that ended his career. To understand why, we need to start at the beginning. Howard Cosell's story begins in Brooklyn, New York, where his family moved when he was just a toddler. Born Howard William Cohen on March 25, 1918, he grew up in a working-class Jewish household that valued education above all else. His father, Isidore, was an accountant, and his mother, Nellie, ran the home. Brooklyn was crowded, noisy, and competitive, and young Howard learned quickly that words could be just as powerful as fists. On the playground, while other kids fought, he out-argued them. He devoured books, quoted literature, and developed a confidence that bordered on arrogance. By the time he reached Alexander Hamilton High School, he was already making waves as the sports editor of the school paper, where his sharp critiques set him apart. Some loved his boldness, others couldn't stand it, but he thrived on that reaction. After earning a BA in English literature and a law degree at NYU, Cosell was already proving himself to be unusually ambitious. He practiced law and even represented big names like Willie Mays, but he wasn't satisfied. He often said he lacked the sufficient mediocrity to stay in that profession. He wanted something more public, something where his voice carried weight. That ambition led him to broadcasting. In 1953, he took on an unpaid role at WABC, hosting a quirky Little League program. While interviewing major league players alongside kids, he realized the power of unscripted conversations. When Yankees outfielder Hank Bauer casually criticized his manager on air, it became a headline. Cosell recognized that real stories came when people let their guard down. He knew he'd found his place. That decision to leave law behind wasn't just about career change, it was about identity. He even changed his last name from Cohen to Cosell, saying it honored his grandfather's original name. It was also a way to stand out in a profession where he wanted to be unforgettable. Cosell wasn't like other sports announcers. In the 1950s and 60s, most broadcasters played nice, serving as cheerleaders for the games they covered. They stuck to safe topics, asked easy questions, and avoided controversy. Cosell blew that tradition apart. From the beginning, he went in with tough, blunt interviews. He'd ask athletes if teammates avoided them for being selfish, or if coaches were failing at their jobs. He listened intently, pressed on weak answers, and refused to let stars hide behind cliches. Some athletes hated him, but others respected him because he let them speak honestly. His voice was also unforgettable, sharp, nasal, and distinct. Audiences might roll their eyes, but they remembered him. Cosell soon landed his own program, Speaking of Sports, a daily segment that ran for decades. His rise wasn't fueled by charm, but by substance and audacity. By the late 1960s, he became the go-to interviewer for athletes making bold political statements. During the Mexico City Olympics in 1968, Tommy Smith and John Carlos trusted Cosell to cover their Black Power salute with seriousness, not mockery. He saw himself not as a promoter of games, but as a journalist holding sports accountable. That attitude earned him enemies in the press box, where many called him arrogant or accused him of making himself the story. But fans tuned in because he was different. Cosell never pretended to be neutral. He admitted his biases openly and demanded honesty from those he interviewed. His tagline, "I tell it like it is," became both a promise and a challenge. Critics labeled him the most hated man in sports, yet others praised him as the conscience of sports broadcasting. Either way, he was impossible to ignore. Cosell had proven that commentary could be bigger than the game itself. No relationship defined Cosell's career more than the one he shared with Muhammad Ali. When Ali announced his new name in 1964, most of the media refused to acknowledge it. They insisted on calling him Cassius Clay, dismissing his choice as arrogance. Cosell, however, immediately called him Muhammad Ali on national television. He insisted that Ali had the right to be recognized for who he was. It was a bold stance at a time when Ali faced fierce backlash for both his name and his conversion to Islam. When Ali later refused to serve in Vietnam, he was stripped of his title, banned from boxing, and vilified by the press. Cosell stood firmly by him. He called the punishment unjust and publicly defended Ali's right to his beliefs. This loyalty went far beyond journalism. It was personal. Cosell, a Jewish kid from Brooklyn who had faced his own share of prejudice, understood what it meant to be marginalized. Ali noticed. Their on-air chemistry became legendary. They teased, argued, and bantered like old friends, with Ali mocking Cosell's toupee and Cosell firing back with biting wit. It was raw, funny, and electrifying. Yet beneath the humor, there was deep respect. Cosell gave Ali a voice when others tried to silence him, and Ali gave Cosell credibility in a sport and culture that often dismissed outsiders. Their partnership was more than entertainment. It was cultural history. Together, they forced America to confront race, war, and identity through the lens of sports. Fans might have tuned in for the laughs, but what they witnessed was groundbreaking. Two men standing side by side, defiant in their own ways, reshaping how the world understood athletes, broadcasters, and the power of speaking truth on television. When ABC launched Monday Night Football in 1970, executives wanted more than just play-by-play. They wanted a spectacle. Bringing in Howard Cosell was a gamble because he wasn't a former player, but his booming, unmistakable style gave the broadcast an edge no one had seen before. Alongside Don Meredith's humor and Frank Gifford's steady presence, Cosell brought drama, wit, and a fiery personality that turned football into primetime entertainment. Ratings soared as viewers tuned in not only for touchdowns, but also to hear Cosell spar with his colleagues. He turned ordinary plays into epic moments, punctuating games with phrases like, "He could go all the way." His commentary was less about statistics and more about storytelling, weaving players' personal lives into the narrative. Fans debated him endlessly in bars and living rooms, while critics accused him of making himself the star. But that was genius. Cosell elevated sports coverage into theater. For the first time, football was on television, and Monday nights became a national ritual. Even those who disliked him admitted that without Cosell, the show wouldn't have had the same energy. He changed how America experienced the game forever, cementing his place in broadcast history. Success brought visibility, but visibility also brought enemies. Cosell became one of the most polarizing figures in sports media. Critics accused him of arrogance, claiming he loved the sound of his own voice more than the game itself. Fellow journalists mocked his toupee, his nasal tone, and even his name change from Cohen to Cosell. Newspapers ran harsh columns, calling him a fraud or a showman. In locker rooms, athletes sometimes bristled at his blunt questions. Still, controversy kept his profile high. The more people booed him, the more others tuned in to see what he'd say next. Rivalries fueled his legend. His feud with sports writer Dick Young became especially personal, playing out across print and television. Yet even his harshest critics couldn't ignore his talent. He had turned sports commentary into something intellectually sharp, politically relevant, and emotionally charged. Fans might loathe him, but they couldn't deny he made sports feel bigger than the scoreboard. For Cosell, that was the point. He didn't want to blend in. He wanted to dominate the conversation. That notoriety carried him for years, but it also set the stage for the downfall that came when one poorly chosen phrase overshadowed everything else he had achieved. Few broadcasters had moments that defined an era the way Cosell did. His famous call during George Foreman's demolition of Joe Frazier, "Down goes Frazier, down goes Frazier, down goes Frazier," was pure theater. It captured the shock, the disbelief, and the raw emotion of the moment, instantly cementing itself as one of the greatest calls in sports history. Then there was December 8, 1980, when news broke during a Monday Night Football broadcast that John Lennon had been murdered. Cosell hesitated, not wanting to announce something so devastating during a game, but his co-host Frank Gifford insisted. With measured gravity, Cosell told millions of Americans that Lennon was dead. For a moment, the game no longer mattered, and Cosell became the messenger of national tragedy. These moments showed the duality of his gift. He could elevate the excitement of sport or deliver world-shaking news with authority. His voice became part of American memory, echoing beyond athletics into culture itself. Cosell's presence proved that broadcasters weren't just narrators, they were historians of the moment. His ability to swing from entertainment to solemnity made him unforgettable. It was this power that made his later downfall so shocking. America expected more from Cosell than anyone else. September 5, 1983, was supposed to be just another Monday Night Football broadcast. The Dallas Cowboys faced Washington, and the crowd was buzzing. Then Alvin Garrett, a wide receiver for Washington, broke free on a play, darting past defenders. Cosell, describing the action, said, "That little monkey gets loose, doesn't he?" It was a phrase that landed like a thunderclap. In living rooms across America, viewers froze. Within hours, ABC's phone lines were jammed with complaints. Newspapers picked up the story, turning it into a national scandal overnight. Civil rights leaders like Reverend Joseph Lowery demanded accountability, framing it as a racial slur. Cosell initially denied saying it, then argued the phrase had no racial meaning and was something he'd used with white players and even his grandchildren. But the damage was done. Replays confirmed the words. Outrage spread, feeding a firestorm ABC couldn't contain. For years, Cosell had been controversial, but now he was accused of something far heavier: racism on live television. Even for a man used to hate mail and protests, this was different. It wasn't just backlash, it was a national reckoning, and his career teetered on the edge of collapse because of one moment on air. In the days following the remark, the backlash didn't quiet, it grew louder. Radio talk shows, television panels, and newspaper editorials tore into Cosell. To many, this wasn't just a bad choice of words, but evidence of deeper prejudice, regardless of his explanations. Sponsors voiced concerns, and ABC executives faced mounting pressure to act. Cosell tried to defend himself by pointing to past broadcasts where he'd used the phrase "little monkey" in reference to white athletes like Mike Adamel and Glenn Howard. He emphasized his history of defending Muhammad Ali, his outspoken support for civil rights, and his own Jewish background as proof he wasn't racist. But the nuance didn't matter in the climate of outrage. The public narrative was already cemented. Cosell had crossed a line. Worse, his denials made him look evasive, as though he couldn't own up to what millions had heard. The controversy quickly overshadowed everything else he had accomplished. For decades, he'd thrived on conflict, but this wasn't a feud with a columnist or a spat with an athlete. This was America itself turning against him. And for the first time, he realized his voice alone couldn't shape the story. His credibility was unraveling. Yet even in the chaos, Cosell wasn't entirely abandoned. Some of the most surprising voices came to his defense. Muhammad Ali, the man he had stood by during the toughest years of his career, publicly supported him. Jesse Jackson argued that Cosell's record on civil rights should not be ignored. Most strikingly, Alvin Garrett himself, the player at the center of the controversy, said he didn't take offense at the remark. Garrett explained that he liked Cosell and didn't view the comment as demeaning. To him, it wasn't an insult. It was just Howard being Howard. These defenses carried weight, but they weren't enough to stop the tidal wave of criticism. In the media, nuance rarely survived. The story was simpler, sharper, and easier to spread. Cosell had said something racist, and that was the headline. Public memory had no room for context, and Cosell's long history of speaking up for athletes of color was largely ignored. Even as supporters rallied, the scandal defined him. His career on television didn't survive the season. The same man who once thrived on being both loved and hated now discovered what it meant to be truly isolated in the court of public opinion. By the end of 1983, Cosell's television career was finished. 13 years after helping turn Monday Night Football into one of America's most watched shows, he stepped away. Officially, he said he was disillusioned with football and television, tired of what he saw as corruption and commercialization. Privately, it was clear the scandal had drained him. His once unshakable confidence seemed broken. Though he continued with radio until 1992, his presence on screen was never the same. At home, his life also unraveled. His wife, Emmy, who had been his anchor for decades, passed away in 1990. Without her, friends said, Cosell was never whole again. His health declined, with cancer, heart disease, Parkinson's, and strokes battering him during his final years. In 1995, he died at 77, a man whose voice had once defined an era now silenced. Reactions to his death reflected his complicated legacy. Some hailed him as a pioneer who made sports broadcasting serious, bold, and unafraid. Others remembered only the arrogance and the scandal that ended his career. Either way, one truth stood firm. Howard Cosell had changed sports forever. Even in disgrace, his shadow loomed over every broadcaster who came after him. Howard Cosell's story is a reminder of how fragile legacies can be. For decades, he was untouchable, the voice that gave sports meaning, the broadcaster who stood by Muhammad Ali, the man who turned Monday Night Football into theater. Yet, one moment, one phrase, brought it all crashing down. Whether you see him as a trailblazer or a cautionary tale, his impact is undeniable. He changed the way America watched, debated, and remembered sports. Love him or hate him, you couldn't tune him out. In the end, Howard Cosell proved that greatness often comes with controversy, and sometimes the same fire that makes a man unforgettable is also what burns him in the end.